Paul, you're very welcome here, and thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's a great honor to have you.
John, super excited to be here, and just being able to connect with you online and offline has been a ultimate pleasure for sure.
That's great. And we enjoyed a good lunch and rally recently as well. So that was nice.
We did. The podcast world is a small world. Halfway across the world, we connected, and then you ended up being here, and we had a great lunch.
Absolutely. It is a small world. But going back a number of years, I mean, you did what every good young son does, goes to school, gets the grades, goes to college, gets the qualification, goes and gets a good pensionable job. You were doing so well, and then you kind of threw it all up in the air. What happened?
I did. So I did what everybody told me to do. So as we were talking before offline, my dad ran his own hardwood floor business for 40 plus years, doing the manual labor. And he said, son, don't do this when you get older. Go to school, get good grades, study, go to college, get a degree. And then my mom was starting her career in the finance world. She started her career kind of after we were going to school, grade school, me and my sister. So she said, yeah, like, you can climb the corporate ladder, get that corner job. And then when you're like 65 or 70, you can retire and then enjoy life. So I said, okay, I guess that's what everyone else does. Everyone told me to do. So that's what I did. I moved to Chicago, sat in a cubicle, crunched numbers, and I would say it was a blessing in disguise. I started in that industry in 2007. So I was probably literally the last person hired on my floor before 2008 came. And once 2008 happened, I saw all these people who were much older than I was at the time losing their job. Their whole life was built on this one job. And for so long, everybody told me it was so safe to get a job. And I watched all these people lose their jobs and not be able to get another job. And I thought, why is this so safe? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Now, obviously, it was kind of a very extreme recession that hit. But to me, it made a lot more sense to run my own business where I was in total control and not just at the mercy of the shareholders, the stockholders, the CEO who's sitting in New York, whoever's looking at the numbers in HR saying, oh, this person's got to go. So, long story short, I quit after less than 3 years working in the finance world, moved to Raleigh and started my own business because I thought, even if I start this business, whatever it was, I didn't even know what it was going to be at the time. But if it crashes and burns and doesn't work, I can always go get another job. I can go sit in another cubicle. I could go work at Starbucks. I could do a lot of different things to at least make ends meet. So I might as well give it a go. And that's what I did. That was 10 years ago now.
And do you think that if it hadn't been for the catalyst of that kind of cataclysmic event at that time, would you have stayed, or was the seeds of discontent kind of growing within you?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's tough to answer. So there were seeds of discontent, but probably just knowing me and knowing human nature, if I saw a lot more potential to move up and make more money. I mean, at one point when I was there, they said, oh, we'll pay for your MBA. So I went and took the GMAT or whatever it is to get into business school. And I was still going to do it because they can lure you with that financial stuff. And then I was like, you know what? This just isn't worth it. So I probably would have stayed longer. So it probably was a blessing in disguise of, realizing a lot quicker that this just isn't for me. Because if I don't want to do this in 20 or 30 years, why am I going to continue to do it now? So that was, it probably definitely sped up the anticipation of making that jump happen just because of what I saw.
It's because it's interesting. I know from my own experience and going back to my own time in the corporate world. I remember at one occasion where we'd made a decision that we were going to shut down a division which had about 150 people in it. And of course, it's traumatic, it's difficult, and it's challenging, and everything else. And you try and do it in the best way you can. And we put different processes in place. But nevertheless, no matter what way you do it, it's an awful day that you're actually telling that number of people. But I stayed in touch with quite a number of those people, and quite a lot of them, an awful lot of them, almost to a man or a woman, would say that something that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it forced me to actually make a decision about where I wanted to go. And I was just kind of getting caught up in the day-to-day routine of it. And I think that, when I work now with clients and, where they've got their own businesses, or whether, it really is, something like that can cause them to really shift their thinking, which is a really good thing. But what was the business that you decided to start?
Yeah, so we ended up so I had played sports my whole life. I coached kids. I was actually coaching my old high school. When I was in college, I coached the high school golf team. So I went into the youth sports world. So we ran after school golf and tennis programs for elementary kids. I loved it. It was awesome. We ran after school programs. So we brought the sports to them. We ran summer camps, parent child events, leagues, tournaments, all that good stuff. So it was great. And I ended up, I was probably working 60 to 80 hours a week. But at that time, in the short term, kind of micro aspect of it was, this is great. I'd rather do this for 80 hours a week instead of sit in a cubicle for 50 to 60. At least I'm passionate. At least I'm making an impact. And that was a big thing for me was I didn't feel like I was making an impact in a cubicle. I was just doing these spreadsheets, processing this, following this system. But I didn't really see any impact. Like if I just disappeared, nobody would care. And not to be
Yeah.
selfish, but that's really not gratifying either. Whereas I could go out into the community, get all these kids excited, give them an opportunity, get the parents excited, and really build something that's making an impact on the community. That's what really got me fired up until I realized I
But now you
couldn't.
come to the hub. Now you get to that kind of
Yeah.
that point where you kind of suddenly realize, hold on a second, I'm now working 60 or 80 hours a week. And if this continues this way, what I've done is that I've just replaced one job with another, which is the classic, isn't it? That you
It
you leave to
100%.
create a life of your own, and then all you've done to a large extent is created a more demanding job with probably a more demanding boss who just happens to be yourself. But nevertheless, it's a more demanding. So you specialized in kind of making that shift and not kind of repeating the story you talk about with your dad, and not being the absolute sole revenue generator. How did you make that shift? What were the things that you did, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so it wasn't easy because just like everyone who starts their own business, it's their baby. No one can do it as good as they can. And I had the same mentality. And for me, I realized that I can't go impact any more people because I literally don't have any more time. So going back to when I quit my job, I kind of re-brought these thoughts to my head of the worst case scenario is probably not as bad as we always think it's going to be. We're always like doom and gloom. It's going to crash and burn. But I realized if I delegate everything to somebody so that this business can truly survive and thrive without me, and it doesn't work, like worst case scenario doesn't work, it's all going to just come back to me anyway. So now I'm like, well, I'm already doing it now. So I might as well just give this a go because, really the trigger point was one, I couldn't go impact any more people. There was demand in the market that I couldn't get, but really that kind of gets lost in the day-to-day grind. But I realized that if I got hit by a bus, and that was just kind of the proverbial question I asked myself was, this business wouldn't survive for more than a week. My wife would be really unhappy. The employees I did have would be out of a job, and all these customers, these thousands of kids, they wouldn't have an opportunity. So that was really the trigger point for me. Is like, I got to do this. So how I did it was, it wasn't easy, like I said, but you got to get over that mental hurdle that if you can do it, so can somebody else. And they might not do it 100% as good as you can because they're not as vested, they're not the owner. But what it really came down to was just doing the exact opposite of what happened to me in the corporate world. Of everything that I didn't like about the training and the onboarding and all that stuff was, I realized, in the corporate world, and you've seen this probably many more times than me, is when you hire somebody. So when I got hired, I just sat next to the person I was learning from and I just took notes all day, every day. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. And then it was my turn to go implement it. And I didn't really remember anything because it was like, just drinking from a fire hose. And I looked at my notes. I'm like, why did I write that? So really doing the exact opposite of everything that I experienced in the corporate world that I didn't like, and being able to implement that in a small business really, made the difference. So I would say the first point of that, though, is getting clear on your personal vision and your personal why. Why am I doing this? So anybody out there, you have a reason of why you quit your job or why you started your business or why you're doing what you're doing. The problem is like you mentioned, all those other things take over and we kind of lose focus of that. So for me, my original personal vision was, I just don't want to have a boss. And I achieved that. So then it was just like, let's just keep this machine going. But then I realized there's a lot more to this. I want to have the freedom. I want to have the income. I want to have the time. I want to have the ability to choose what I want to do. And I want to have the peace of mind that if something does happen to me, this business will continue to thrive and support my family. Or if something happens to my family and I have to step away, this business will continue to support our family so we can spend time with the people that matter most. So that's kind of
But
where the next thing started.
but it's kind of it's kind of easy to say that with hindsight, but the old saying that it's very hard to remember when when the alligator is snapping at your heels, that the objective was to clean the pond, right? And we kind of all know that, But how did you actually get yourself to do it? Because I mean, intellectually you know it, but emotionally it's a different thing. And the other thing that I find, you talked about delegating, and when I work with a lot of clients who are leading teams, or it can be CEOs or senior leaders in companies and businesses, that they issue when it comes to delegating are two things. One is that they think that the person can do it as well as they can, right? The second one is that they actually like doing the thing in the first place, so they don't want to let it go. And the third thing is that they're not comfortable that somebody would do it differently to them, even if it gets the same result, because they never do it the same anyway. Better or worse is in the eye of the beholder, but they won't do it the same. So how did you really get yourself over that hump to really be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. All three things you listed, that's exactly what I went through. That's exactly what everyone goes through. So really what I found is you probably need three things, and you probably work on this with your clients as well. First, you need a coach, a mentor, somebody who has been in a place where you're at right now and they've gotten to a place where you want to go. So whoever that is, it doesn't have to be a formal coach. It could be a mentor, somebody that you can lean on for advice, because business ownership can be a lonely world. And it's like, we feel like we're the only ones doing this and we're isolated on an island. So if you have that, so I reached out to people who were in places that I want to be. I'm like, hey, how do I need to do this? Once I figured out I need to do it, it's kind of like, there's a lot of things we know we need to do, but then we never really take action. So you have that mentor. The second thing is you actually need a plan. So without a plan, you're really just aimlessly wandering, and maybe you'll get there someday. So growing up, even in school, I never read a book. I literally didn't read one book probably my entire life. Every time we had to read a book in school, I would just either go find the cliff notes, go find something that I didn't have to read the book. And then in college, I literally didn't. People probably don't believe this, and they still don't believe this. I literally didn't skip a class in college my entire 4 years there, but I didn't read a book. So I just learned by doing that. So I hated reading, just because to me it didn't really make much sense. But I started reading. I started consuming content, of listening to podcasts and really learning from people as well through that. So putting together a plan. And then the last thing that I think is missing from a lot of people is the accountability factor. So you need someone to hold you accountable. You can have a coach and you can have a plan, but if no one's going to hold you accountable, you're probably going to fall off the bandwagon. That's a reason most New Year's resolutions never happen, because there's nobody holding you accountable. So my accountability peers at the time, before I knew what a mastermind was, were the people that I hired to basically take everything off my plate. We would get together, once every 2 weeks and say, okay, this is what we're going to do in the next 2 weeks. And this is going to be your new role. This is going to be your new responsibility. And me just putting it out there made me have to do it, because otherwise I'm going to let John down. I'm going to let Arthur down. I'm going to let George down. So I had to do it. So when I had those three things working, and I had that personal vision at the top kind of driving everything, that became the ultimate filter of, I know this is going to be hard. I know they're not going to do it as well as I can, but I know I have to do it to get to where I really want to go. So having those 3 or 4 things in place really made the difference, just to get the momentum going and staying on track.
Yeah. You talk also about the kind of the power of process and systems, and leveraging the power of process and systems. And for many entrepreneurs, I mean, I suppose you may be somewhat different because you've got a kind of financial background which tends to be very organized and structured. At least that's the theory, and or at least the image that accountants like to give. For a lot of entrepreneurs, kind of process and systems is not something that they naturally slot into. But you're really saying that they are absolutely fundamental if you want to actually remove yourself from being at the center of the business.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if you look at most businesses that are started, usually it's in the service-based world because they're cheaper, easier, quicker to get started. And whoever's starting it, whether it's an artist, a guy that cuts grass, someone that cleans windows, someone that builds houses, whatever it is, they are kind of the artist in that realm. That is their expertise. So that's why they got into business, because they really like drawing pictures. They really like cutting grass, whatever it is. They don't really care about the systems and processes, because at first it's just, let's go get customers and we'll figure it out later. Eventually you don't have time to figure it out later. So, you're 100% right that nobody really thinks of that. No one gets excited about that. Me having a finance background, that's what gets me excited. That's why I help people who are really good at what they do put the systems and processes in place so they can continue to focus on what they're really good at. Whether they're still delivering the service, that's a different question, but at least leveraging their experience and expertise to teach more people how to do it. So I can come in and kind of help them on the back end. But without that, you really do just have a job, because you're self-employed. You don't really have a business. And the definition of being employed is you're making money when you're working, and when you're not working, you're not making money. And unfortunately, most business owners are in that realm without the benefits from being employed by somebody else. At least if you're employed by somebody else, you get disability, you get a retirement plan, you get healthcare, you get all these things, kind of the golden handcuffs. But if you're going to be self-employed and you don't have a plan or a vision or a mission to not be self-employed, you might be better off being employed by somebody else, just from the peace of mind standpoint. So usually having those conversations with people really gets them to kind of trigger and be like, okay, you're right. I need to start making these changes. And you don't have to change overnight. It's a process.
Yeah. I mean, I know, and it's an area that you specialize in, is kind of going in and working with people to actually make sure that they don't fall into that trap of being the revenue generator and the marketeer and the customer service and everything else wrapped in one. So when you go in, how do you start to create those processes and systems? Just if you can just walk me through the process that you walk your clients through to actually do that.
Yeah. So I think the first part starts where we talked about originally, is figuring out what their personal vision is, because that should be the filter of everything that you do. Is my goal is, and I think everyone's goal should be, to build a business so that it can support the lifestyle that you want. Unfortunately, most people kind of do the opposite, and they're trying to build this business and their lifestyle is just an afterthought, and they put themselves on the back burner. So what is your vision? What is your goal? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to spend more time with grandkids? Whatever that is. And then let's put a dollar amount of how much money do you need to make to actually make that happen. And usually it's a lot less than we think, because we just get these dreams of, I want to make $1 million. I want to make this amount of money, but it's not really tied to anything. We don't have a plan how to get there. So getting really clear on that personal vision and how much money it takes. Well, then, so we're kind of working backwards. Then we need to figure out, what kind of business do you need to build in order to make that happen? How much money does it need to be? What's your org chart look like? Do you need an account manager? Do you need a salesperson? Do you need an operations person? How many people do you need? What does your future org chart look like? Right now, you might be doing all the tasks, and that's fine. The goal is to slowly peel all those away, so eventually you are just the CEO. And then once we have that, we have a destination. It's a lot easier to put a plan in place to get there. So, the next thing I work with them on is really just outlining every single thing that happens in their business. And it doesn't matter what size business you're running, you're basically going to have 5 core systems. Every business has these systems. The first one is the lead generation. So if you follow the customer journey, this is what the customer goes through. So you just need to systematize every part of that. So the customer, the lead generation is the first part. So how are people finding out about you? Your marketing efforts, your advertising efforts, your PR, whatever it might be. People are interested in you. Then the second system is the sales. So now you're turning that interested person into a paying customer. What are all the activities you do there? And now you're actually servicing your customers. So the third one is kind of customer relations. So you have your customer service, which is reactive, and you have your customer experience, which is proactive. So that's kind of your third one. The fourth one is the actual service or product that you sell. So how do you deliver it on a consistent basis in a systematic way? And then the last one, which everybody hates usually, except someone like myself, is the operations, all the back end stuff, this, that makes everything go, whether it's financials, the scheduling, the CRM system, all those things, the website, the technology, everything else that makes it go. So if you have those 5 systems, what I recommend everybody do, and I just call it the delegation snowball, kind of playing off Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. It's the same concept. Literally document, and I just mean write down every single thing that you do within each system. Who does it? Who should be doing it in your future organization? How long does it take? How often does it get done? And then how bad do you want to delegate it? And you just number it all out. And then you do that for everything. And now you just start at the top. The thing that you want to delegate the most, let's create a system and process around that. So I've walked people through, once you've got there, now you need to perfect that process, which just means you do it the same way every time so somebody else could do it. And then you document how it's done. So this is where a lot of people assume things, and the more you assume, the less likely the person you hire is going to do it the way you want. So I recommend using something like Zoom that we're chatting on right now, just to do a screen recording of a computer task. And if it's an in-person task, we have really powerful cameras in our pocket. You can just record how it's done there. So that's documenting it, and then you either automate it or you delegate it. So you give it to somebody or something to do it, so it's now off your plate. If you just did that once a day, by the end of the year, you'd have created, 365 processes that are no longer on your plate.
Okay, that's a really interesting way of going about it. Can I talk to you about just the other part of that? Because once you start to hire staff, now you become you're becoming a manager of people, you're becoming a leader of people. And one of the areas that I work a lot in is people who are making that transition from being sometimes being an individual contributor to being a manager, or maybe a manager of managers, and understanding what are the things they need to focus in on, and what are the things that actually will separate them from being average to being, really excellent. How did you make that transition yourself, and how do you help your clients make it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things that you can't really learn. Like, you can't go to school and say, this is how you become a leader. Like, you just kind of have to figure it out with guidance along the way. And really, everything that I was doing to be a leader was the exact opposite of how I was led in the corporate world. So I think it comes down to empathy. So really just understanding what your employees go through on a day-to-day basis is so huge, and sitting down and having those conversations. And it's not rocket science, but it's really just treating people the way you want to be treated. Obviously there's more to it, and you need strategies and you need motivating tactics, but the grand scheme of things, if you have empathy for your people and you know what they're going through, and you appreciate them and you recognize them in front of their peers, and you continue to cast the business's vision while also figuring out what their personal vision is and where do you really want to go. And then it's my job as your leader to help you get there. Even if this is just one stepping stone and you don't want to be here forever, I know I'll get a lot more out of you if I can help you get to where you want to go. And they'll be forever grateful, and we'll be forever grateful. So that human element is sometimes lost, because I see a lot of leaders, managers, business owners say, well, John's already getting paid to do his job. Why isn't he doing it? Like, why do I need to rah him up? I'm not here to cheerlead him. I'm not here to give him incentive to show up on time. Why do I give him a bonus? He's already getting a good paycheck. Like, that mentality, that's not going to get you very far. And what I found was, anytime something goes wrong, the leader needs to take the blame. Anytime something goes right, you need to give your team all the praise. And in my opinion, the best leaders do that because they have that bigger vision. They don't have the ego, and they know this is what's best for the team, not just best for me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find, as I said, working with clients, is really helping leaders understand that within the leadership role, and there's many aspects to that, but if you just focus in on two key areas, one is managing, and the other is coaching. And people, we tend to use kind of words interchangeably, and kind of sometimes when we're talking about coaching, we're actually talking about managing, and vice versa. And is understanding what is the difference between the two. Because certainly my own experience in going back to my corporate world days is that I got a lot more out of a team when I was coaching them than just by managing them. And because you manage process and things, and you coach people, and being able to separate the two, and understanding that the coaching conversation is a very different conversation to the managing conversation. And nobody will ever, I don't think anybody has ever said to me, listen, I don't believe in coaching. I mean, people say, but then when you actually say, well, how much time do you spend coaching? Well, that's a little bit vague, right? And they don't. And very often it's that they just don't know how to go about coaching somebody. They don't know how that conversation goes, because the managing conversation is much more about, we said we're going to do this, and have you done that, and measuring and tracking, and looking at numbers, and various things that you measure. Whereas coaching is a conversation about that individual that you're coaching, and that's a very different dynamic and a very different energy of conversation. But the leaders that really embrace that and take it on, they're the ones that really, they're much better at their own role, but secondly, they actually make the people that they have reporting to them, they make them much more effective, and they're optimizing the potential. But it is a big shift, and I don't underestimate it. One of the things that you talk about on your site is the 5 things that you need to stop doing immediately. And I'm just curious as to what they are, because I'm sure I'm doing one or two of them.
So this is really kind of right in line with what we're talking about, is building a better culture within your organization. So the first thing that I find is so powerful is when you're leading a team, to never use the word I need you guys to do this. I want this done. My customers, my clients, it's we. If you can just exchange the word I for we, and mine for ours, and things like that, it really makes it feel like we're all in this together. But when you have that I mentality, it really puts a big barrier in between you and your team, from a hierarchical standpoint of like, well, I'm better than everybody else. So if you can just, that's the first one, is just eliminate I, exchange it with we, and stop using mine, use ours, that type of thing. The second one, I learned from the corporate world days as well of, when someone tells you, hey, John, here's your new task. And then if I say, well, how do I do that? And you say, I don't know, then it's like, well, I just kind of lost credibility. So don't delegate anything that you don't know how to do. Now, you don't have to be the expert, but you should at least be able to have a logical conversation with them and not just say, I don't know, figure it out. And along those lines, this is where I really got frustrated in the corporate world was I would just question, well, why do we do it this way? And, they just say, well, I don't know, that's the way we've always done it. And to me, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, we don't know why we're doing it. Then why are we even doing it if we don't know why? So, really stop delegating tasks that you don't know how to do. And like I said, you don't have to be the expert, but you should at least be able to have a logical conversation, with your team members on whatever they're doing, because they're going to respect you a lot more and they're going to see you as that leader a lot more. So that's the second one. The third one would be hiring for talent. So I see a lot of business owners, leaders get stuck in this when they don't have a real defined standard operating procedures. They don't have defined systems. They just say, I need someone that's really good at this. So they go and hire someone that's really good for that, because they don't have a way to train that person, teach that person, coach that person. It's just like, I need the best talent. That very rarely ever works. If you have standard operating procedures and you have systems and processes, you can always fix the system, which then allows you to hire for personality. But when you hire for talent, it's a very slippery slope, because 9 times out of 10, they're probably not going to be a joy to work with within your team and the culture you're trying to build. So if you can hire for personality and train for the job, it's going to make your life a lot easier, which kind of leads into the fourth one, delegating before the proper system is in place. So if I say, John, here's your task, this is what we want to do, and then you say how to do it, I'm like, I don't really know, but you can figure it out. And then every time that comes up, John's just going to do it a little bit differently. He's going to continue to put out the fire, but he's never proactively going to create a real system, a real process, so that it happens the same way every time. So that's the fourth one. And then the last one, which this is total opposite of my experience in corporate America, but in corporate America, we had meetings once a week. And to me, it was like, this is the most wasteful thing. We're going to sit here and blab on for 55 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes we'll get to the point. But what I found in running a real team, you need to have those weekly meetings, have those regular team meetings, and not just to blab on. And, I definitely set a time frame around it, because work expands the amount of time we allow it to, and everyone sat in those corporate meetings. The only reason I like corporate meetings is because it was an hour that I didn't have to sit in a cubicle, but other than that, nothing got done. So, having that meeting to actually have a plan and share the vision, give updates, check in on everybody. Hey, John, I know you're working on a marathon. How's that going? How's your training going? Anything we can do to help? Really collaborating instead of just doing it because you have to do it. It felt like in the corporate world, people were doing it just because someone in New York said, hey, have your weekly meeting and this is what you need to discuss. But like 95 out of 100 people in any of those meetings, if they were that big, they played no role in the meeting. So really making sure everybody is a part of the meeting and not just sitting there like just thinking and looking and saying, I wonder what I'm going to eat for lunch today type of deal. So having those team meetings are so important if you have a plan around it. So I would say those are the 5 things. Using I, stop doing that. Stop delegating tasks that you don't know how to do. Stop hiring for talent. Stop delegating before the proper system is in place. And you need to start having team meetings.
Okay. And it's interesting when you talk about hiring, and I agree with you that in terms of, hiring, because you've got to hire the people who fit into the culture of the business, which is a different question than do they have the skills? Okay, we make, because to a large extent, within reason, I can teach you the skill, within reason, but I can't give you a kind of personality transplant. That's going to be a bit more challenging. So it's actually, does the person, and is the person going to be engaged in this organization? Because if you look at, when you're talking about kind of vision and mission and values, what people are looking for is to join organizations that are, consistent with their values. So you got to make sure that there's a fit between those things to actually do that. But can I ask you one thing? As we talk about hiring, it just reminded me of something that just struck me. For people with their own business, when do you actually make the decision to hire? Do you wait until you're completely snowed under with the task that you're doing, or do you try and do it ahead? Or the argument to be, well, maybe I don't do the revenue, but I've got to, so which bit do you do? Which comes first?
So you kind of have to take a leap of faith, in my opinion, because if you wait till you're snowed in, it's going to be a dumpster fire. It's going to be a hot mess because you're not going to have time to spend with that person. They're going to try and figure it out on their own. So I always say hire before you need somebody, and having so we as business owners, we spend so much time marketing for customers, but we never spend any time marketing for employees until we need somebody like tomorrow. So then we just go find somebody that we like, okay, you got a heartbeat, you got a pull, okay, you're good, you're in, we'll figure it out along the way. And then you get in this kind of rat race of, okay, that didn't work, this didn't work. And then eventually you just get defeated of, this hiring thing isn't for me. There's no good help out there. So, I equate it to any sports team. So here in the US, every professional sports team, their roster is always full. So in the NBA, every team has 15 players on their roster. If LeBron James walked into any of those teams, they wouldn't say, LeBron, sorry, we're full. We don't need anybody right now. Give us a call. We'll call you in like 6 months and maybe we have room for you then. You're not going to do that. So why would we do that with our business? Like if somebody walks in the door, applies for a job that's an all-star, you kind of have to figure it out. So when you're constantly marketing and recruiting, you have a lot better chance to build a strong team because, if you look at fishing, you always have your pole in the water and you never know who's going to bite. But if you're only fishing or you're only looking for employees when you really need somebody, there's a really good chance that you're going to hire somebody that you are going to regret probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I know that I mean, so you work a lot with clients and to actually help them to do what we're talking about and kind of getting them out of the day to day of the business and to run the business. But I know that you've more recently you've kind of initiated a mastermind group, and where does that fit in what you're doing and what's that doing for your clients?
Yeah. So kind of what we talked about before, what I ended up realizing is I do some one-on-one coaching, but I realized the power of a mastermind can get people so much exponentially better results, in my opinion, especially in the business ownership world. Because at the end of the day, business ownership is a lonely world. But it doesn't have to be. We're just in our game every day, sitting at our desk, and we feel nobody else is going through this. So when you can start surrounding yourself with other people who are going through the same thing, whether it's running a race, like if you go just outside running right now, you're going to stop a lot sooner than you would if someone was running next to you. That's just 100% facts. Because then it's like, I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop. And then you have that accountability and then you start cheering each other on. So business is the same way. So, what I found is if you have that coach, someone who's done what you've done, someone who's done what you want to do, someone who is at a place where you want to be, and they give you a plan and then you provide that accountability, it really is powerful. And I've even seen this kind of in the personal fitness space, and I equate it to 65% of Americans are overweight. Not because of lack of knowledge. Everybody in America knows they can go to Google and figure out how to not be overweight. But they don't have a coach, they don't have a plan, and they don't have accountability. So I go to a kickboxing gym 3 or 4 times a week, and I have a coach. He's there every day. He gives me a plan. But the power of accountability, if I don't show up at 5 a.m. when I know everyone else is going to show up at 5 a.m., the next time I go, I'm going to hear it from everybody. So it's like, I don't want to be the person that didn't show up, or did not show up. So having that accountability group is so powerful to share the experiences, go on the journey together. And the other thing I found was there's just so many business owners who need what I do. And my one-on-one coaching was cost prohibitive for a lot of people because there's only one of me and a lot of people to serve. So, what better way than to get all these people together who are going on the same thing? They have similar goals, they have the vision, they have the desire, and they just need to learn from other people. So not only do they learn from me, but everyone else in the group shares their best tips and tactics, and they're all from different industries. So it's like, hey, I know you probably don't do this in the home service world, but in the real estate world, this is what we do, and it works really well. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So having that sounding board and having that accountability and really kind of a personal board of directors of, I have this problem and I finally have somebody I can go talk to that actually understands it. Because what I found as a business owner, if I go talk to my neighbors or I go to a social gathering and I talk about being a business owner, they like eyes glaze over and they're like, oh, did you see the football game last night? Like there is no conversation. So being able to have that safe place where you can have these business conversations, get vulnerable, that's really the way to make the most progress. So that's really what we focus on. And then obviously they have access to all my trainings and everything
Sure.
as well that I
Yeah.
work through,
Okay.
kind of what we've talked through.
So it's a good kind of additional kind of part of the business that people are gravitating towards, and you're obviously looking to build that. Listen, before we wrap up, a couple of things I ask everybody. One is a book that you have read, you may be reading currently or read in the past, that has made an impact upon you, and what book that would be.
Yeah, so there's so many. So
Yeah.
I would say the one that I just read is called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. So it's a really good book for not just business owners, but leaders in general. What I really like about it is each chapter is like literally 3 pages, but he forces you to set aside time. I think he calls it like thinking time. So like time to work on your business, on your team, whatever it is, to, hey, think about this and then go implement it. So it's a really good book. It's kind of like a blueprint, his experience, good content, but also telling you to go do actionable advice. So that's one of many. There's, as you know, hundreds of books out there.
That's really interesting. You should have picked that book, because I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're in Australia, and I asked the same question. And that was the book. That was the book they mentioned.
Really?
Yeah.
So yeah, I literally just read it. It was the last book I read. Now I'm reading Never Split the Difference, kind of how to negotiate and communicate.
Right, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. Check it out.
Yeah, because he worked with Tony Robbins, didn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he did, actually. I think he did some work with him. And the second question, daily habits, daily rituals. Do you have any, and what are they, if you don't mind sharing them?
Yeah, so my day is pretty structured, and I kind of have to be. So somebody recently just told me, like, routines are good, but they can also get you into a rut because you don't push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So anything aside, my day is very structured. So my daily rituals, I get up at 3:55 every morning. I don't know why I picked that time, mainly because I wanted to be ready to go by 4 o'clock, I guess. And I set my watch and it ended at 3:55. But I get up, kind of do my morning routine. I'll read. I found that if I read at night, I fall asleep. So I'll read in the morning. I'll kind of get ready for the day. And then if it's the days that I go to the gym, I go to the gym at first. So I'll leave here a little bit before 5, get to the gym. Any day I'm ready to go by 6 o'clock as far as taking care of. So we have a 3-year-old daughter. So I help my wife get her ready, feed her breakfast, get her lunch ready. And then my wife takes her to work. They leave the house at 6:30. And then I'm kind of, I really structure my day around and kind of using what we talked about before, but where do I really want to go and what kind of business do I need to build? So I find the morning routine just sets me up for success. And then at the end of the day, I go to bed really early. Literally, our daughter goes to bed at 7:30 and me and my wife are sleeping by 8 o'clock, 8:30. So what I found, anything that I was doing after 8 o'clock was not valuable. Is usually just watching TV and sitting there and scrolling on Facebook and doing things that weren't really adding any value. And I'd rather just sleep and get up early and make the day happen.
That's great. I think the getting up early is just so productive. Paul, this was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I know there's going to be huge value. Where can people reach out to you? We put it in the show notes, but where can people reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the easiest, just go to my website, paulmaskill.com, Maskill. You go there. It's got all my resources, the free downloads, free training, information about the mastermind. Or if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, just search me. There's only a couple of us in the world. One of them is my dad. So if you connect with him instead of me, he's not on LinkedIn, but he is on Facebook. Other than that, there's like 1 or 2 guys with the same name somewhere over in the UK, but that's about it. So you can find me really anywhere online.
You're lucky to that sort of. You should look for John Murphy.
John Murphy. There's a lot of those.
There's a lot of those. Paul, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks, Sean. Really enjoyed it.